Good morning and welcome to the joint media availability this week for the Senate and House Republican caucuses. I'm Kim Moritz, Communications Director for the Senate Republicans, and I'll be moderating this morning. Today we're joined by Senate Republican Leader John Brine from the 20th Legislative District, Senator Ann Rivers, Senate Caucus Chair from the 18th Legislative District, House Republican Leader Representative J.T. Wilcox from the 2nd Legislative District, and Representative Ed Orcutt, Ranking Republican on the House Appropriations Committee. And I am sorry, Representative Orcutt, I do not have your district in front of me. My apologies. With that, I will turn it over to Senator Brine for opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Kim. And just so everybody knows, in case you didn't, Ed Orcutt is my seatmate. So he also represents the 20th District. And we're happy to have him on the call. So, well, thanks for being with us this morning. I'm just going to go over a couple items. I want to highlight no surprises here. We're into phase 3 with our businesses up to 50%. So far, so good. I'm optimistic that these businesses are going to be able to operate safely with good safeguards and keep their employees, their customers safe. And hopefully we can continue to see declining rates across the state and move towards more openings in a thoughtful and safe fashion. So I think we're on the right track. We've been pushing on this a long time, and while it's not exactly on the schedule we have advocated for, at least it's forward progress, and I'm pleased with that. Same sort of thing on schools. We've been pushing on getting kids back in school for over 6 months, and recognizing the hazards to these children of not being in school, both academically but also socially, emotionally, and the long-term consequences of that. And it's taken a while, but I was pleased with the governor pushing on this last week. So I think that's good news. Again, not exactly the plan we had in mind, but I'm grateful that we're headed in the right direction. We all seem to be pulling more in that same direction at this point. So we will continue to push till we get all our children back in school safely. We think it can be done sooner, not later, and that there's ongoing harm the longer we wait. So pleased that we're getting some progress, but not going to let up on pushing, because this is a hugely important issue for our state and for the children in our state. The last thing I would mention, well, maybe two things to go together. It's budget time of the session, so we expect to see the majorities roll out a budget in the near future. And unlike what we thought 6 or 8 months ago, we are flush in every possible way. We have had amazing resilience in our economy and lots of revenue as a result. We expect, based on collections last couple months, that the next forecast could put us several $billion to the good. So really in amazingly good shape. And then on top of that, based on the stimulus bill out of Congress, whether you like it or not, we have about $15 billion coming our way in one form or another, of which it looks like the legislature will have considerable discretion on somewhere between $4 and $6 billion. So that's a lot of money, and I think we can do some good things with it, but we got to be very, very careful, in my opinion. And I'm hopeful that the majority share this concern, that we don't create a huge bow wave that takes future taxes to cover. And speaking of taxes, we have a few tax bills in front of us. It's kind of surprising, given the challenges we faced over the last year, that the first response is new taxes. You saw the capital gains pass out of the Senate. It's working its way through the House, and I'll let JT or Ed talk about that. But wrong time to be, whether you like the tax or don't like the tax, whether you think it's constitutional, unconstitutional. And just to be clear, I'm in the unlike category and the unconstitutional category. Now is the terrible time to be thinking about this. And then on top of that, we saw a very, very complex and far-reaching cap and tax bill heard in Ways and Means yesterday, and a very divisive bill, not just along partisan lines, is what we heard yesterday. So another potential tax to the citizens of the state of Washington. I think, again, wrong time to even be considering that. So that's what I think we have in front of us. Happy to take questions, but I'll start off by turning it over to Representative Wilcox for his intro.
Okay, thank you very much. And I too am glad to see everybody here. And as I've said quite a few times, it will be a much better day when we're all in the same room. I hope that the traditional press availability where people have to be eye to eye isn't something that ends up being a long-term casualty of this emergency, even though sometimes it's a little more convenient to be on the phone. Going back to what Senator Brine said about the state of emergency and the governor's recent actions that make it a little bit easier to operate businesses, allow people to get out and socialize, which I think is really critical after a year of not doing that for many people. And also efforts that are at least in the right direction in terms of opening schools. I just want to point out the legislature could have done this. We could have done it months ago, and we could have done it with far more transparency. And it is things that the legislature is equipped to do. And the 7.5 million people in the state of Washington who elect the 147 senators and representatives deserve to see the normal functioning of government. So I would say that I'm glad that the governor is moving, glad that he is incorporating some of our proposals, but it is absolutely critical that the legislature provide its function also. And the fact that it has yet to do that, and by all accounts, looks like it's going to finish up this session with us still under extensive emergency orders, I think is not really the best way for us to go, because people deserve to see their constitutional government operating in the way that it has operated over almost all of our history. I am going to turn it over in just a moment to my friend and colleague, Representative Ed Orcutt, to talk about the tax situation as it appears in the House. But I also want to say one more thing in addition to Senator Brine's statements about it being unneeded and unconstitutional. It also is not going to do a thing to address what many people agree is a regressive tax system here, even though it's very resilient, as we've seen in the face of all of the crazy events of the last year. The way to really help the bottom end of the economic spectrum, where people are hurting and often have an unfair burden, is not to just raise taxes on other people. It is to provide relief to the people that are struggling. And the House, because I think of the example of Representative Stokesbury, finally, after I think 13 years, decided to fund the Working Families Tax Credit. That is the way that you address regressivity at the lower end of the tax system. You forgive or you rebate taxes that were paid by people that are struggling. And so it's not only unconstitutional, unneeded, it doesn't address the problem that it is purported to address. So Ed, you are the expert in these things. You've been our House Republican lead for longer than I've been in the House. And I think your observations would be valuable.
Thanks, JT. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ed Orcutt, representative from the 20th, the ranking member on the House Finance Committee. And I'm sure some of you know that the House Finance Committee heard testimony on the capital gains income tax yesterday, Senate Bill 5096. Very interesting testimony. We heard some people testifying of all the services that they wanted as a result of passing it. But as you have seen, as you've heard already, we're seeing our revenues coming back and doing quite well. And in fact, we just got a collections update yesterday. The collections update showed that we're up by about another 173 million above what we were expecting when we did the forecast in November. Since the November forecast, we've seen revenue collections come in over $760 million above expectations. I want to say that again, $760 million above expectations. So our tax system is doing quite well at raising money. I agree with my colleagues who've spoken that it's unnecessary. I think I've just helped illustrate that. I think that the revenue forecast comes out tomorrow. When you factor in the positive collections that we've had since November, I think we're going to see that our forecasts are going to be up considerably. It's unpopular. I'm hearing from a lot of constituents saying, do not do this. Some say, I won't even be affected by this, but I don't want to see you do this. The state doesn't need more money. The state needs to be smarter in how it spends. And there's also a contingent that are saying, we're concerned that this is going to lead to an income tax and it's going to eventually be applied to everyone. And I think that brings us to the unconstitutional aspect of it. But the other thing that I think is very important is you hear all these people talking about, we want all these services to be funded, but they want a stable funding source. They don't want to see revenues go up and down and you know, up and down like a yo-yo, which is what they tend to do when you have something as unstable as a capital gains income tax or an income tax. And that makes budgeting extremely difficult. So there are a whole lot of reasons why we shouldn't be doing it. We've still got a number of employers that are struggling out there, a number of individuals that are struggling out there. Taxing money out of the economy right now is the absolute wrong thing to be doing. We want people who have money to be investing in our economy and their own businesses and not have it taxed away from them. So, you know, I think it's getting ahead of itself also because we have the tax structure work group that just started its work last year. It is not scheduled to put a report out until 2022. So nearly 2 more years before we get conclusions from that to know whether this would be a good substitute for anything in our tax system, or is this just going to be added on? So right now is not the right time for a number of reasons to be adding any new taxes, especially one that's this unstable. And with that, I'll turn it back over to JT or whoever's next.
I think Kimberly is going to ask for questions.
All righty, let's do that. First, we have Rachel LaCourte with the AP. Go ahead, Rachel.
Hi, good morning. A recent AP poll found that 42% of Republicans nationally say they probably or definitely won't get vaccinated. So I want to ask you all, do you plan to be vaccinated when you're able to? And do you think there should be more outreach from Republican leaders to their constituents on this issue?
Well, I'll go ahead and say what I've said quite a few times. I've given tens of thousands of vaccinations myself to livestock, and it's only fair that I get vaccinated. I have said this many times, and I'm not in favor of mandatory vaccinations, but unless somebody specifically has a risk factor, I think it is a something that you should very strongly consider, and I'll keep saying that.
Yeah, largely the same. I've been very clear that I intend to get a vaccination once I'm eligible. Several members of my family, either because of their age or because they're in the medical field, are already vaccinated. So I don't think there's any question there. In terms of you know, leadership or communication on this issue, I don't know what else you do. You set the example, but we stand for folks making their own individual choice. I'd encourage them to make the choice to get a vaccination, but it is their choice to make, in my opinion.
I would agree. I probably will get one. Waiting to see when I'm eligible. When I am, I will just talk with my doctor and see what my doctor thinks. But my inclination would be to get one, especially when I'm trying to meet with a variety of different constituents. I think it's you know, it would be prudent for me to do so. But at the same time, I'm not going to tell any of my constituents what they have to do in regards to how they keep themselves and their families safe.
I agree. That's the problem with going last.
Yeah, we'll make you first next.
Yeah. Okay, Rachel, did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, and next we'll go to Austin Jenkins with Northwest News Network.
Thanks. Still have too many buttons to press over here to talk to you. Following up on the conversation about taxes and the revenue forecast, what are your thoughts about tapping the rainy day fund? This may be a little bit of a repeat question, but I'm curious about your thoughts on that. And what are you expecting, especially Representative Orcutt, what are you expecting the revenue forecast to bring tomorrow?
Well, it's hard for me to make a prediction as to exactly how much it's going to be. The fact that we're up 763 million since above what we're expecting in November suggests that it's going to be a pretty significant increase. And I would say, we need to wait and see what the numbers come in and get the next balance sheet and see where we're at, the budget outlook, and see where we're at. I would rather we used a little bit of reserve in this COVID crisis than to increase any taxes.
I'll jump in there. I think I don't want to speak for the state economist. He'll tell us tomorrow, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if the increase is north of $3 billion over the 4-year. It could be, I think, as high as $5 billion. If you just prorate it out, it's a big number. And I would say a couple things. One, I don't think based on that it's necessary to use the rainy day fund, and to the extent we don't need to use it, we shouldn't. There's no guarantee we don't have another crisis in our near future of a different sort. So we have the opportunity to stay prepared. We should stay prepared. And then the last thing I'd say is, in both the Senate Republican budget that was proposed and the House budget, I believe, we proposed moving the sales tax on motor vehicles to transportation. I think if the increase is that big, it absolutely gives us the flexibility to rethink how we fund transportation. And we know our current system doesn't work. We know by moving that's on the order of $24 billion over the next 16 years into transportation. And we know our transportation system badly needs that sort of investment. So I think this is a huge opportunity for us to rethink not only the operating budget and whether we use the rainy day fund or not, but also think, how do we rebalance our finances for better stability in the future?
Okay. Austin, do you have a follow-up?
Just briefly, and maybe just one of the members could respond to this, but I've heard your arguments against the capital gains tax. One of the arguments we hear from Democrats for it is this is a tax on the very wealthiest Washingtonians. It wouldn't even kick in until you were making a gain of over $250,000. Why not ask the wealthiest who have managed through this crisis pretty well based on the numbers we've seen from Forbes? Why not ask them to pay a little bit more? Like, why protect them from this tax?
Austin, this is Ann Rivers. I don't think it's so much protecting the uber rich as it is protecting the middle class in Washington state. We know that they are going to be collecting our federal income tax form to see if we owe the tax or not. And we also know that communications have been FOIA'd from members who say this is really just the step to find out how much we could get from an income tax, or this is our way of getting an income tax by a simple majority, because they feel strongly that the Supreme Court, and why wouldn't they think this considering the State v. Blake decision, they feel that the Supreme Court is now poised to vote in the affirmative on their position. So this is not about the uber rich. This is about protecting the middle class in our state.
And I would absolutely agree with that, because I do believe that this is the inroads to an income tax that will come down and eventually hit middle income individuals, and maybe even a little bit lower down than just middle income. So I think once they open the door for this tax, it will be expanded and expanded and expanded to collect more money. Every time we have excess revenue, they're still looking for more. I mean, look at 2019. And all you have to do is go back 1 year to when we wrote the 2018 biennial, the supplemental budget. We got to 2019 and we were expecting $6 billion more revenue, and they still raised taxes by $2.5 billion. So it's a question of how much is enough. And I can tell you that the people out there, the citizens out there that are talking to me, they say it's enough. You've got way too much. You do not need more. We can look at doing tax relief with the revenues that we've got coming in now. And so if this is an issue of our tax code being regressive, then lower taxes on everyone, or at least lower taxes on the most regressive taxes. So sales tax, why aren't we lowering that? What about the property tax? Why aren't we lowering that? I've got a bill out there to do that. Would actually take us down more in line with what we were expecting when we did the McCleary decision. We're pulling in way more in property tax revenue than what we expected when we passed the McCleary fix. So why not do property tax relief? That would help everybody. It would help the lower income. It would help the middle income, because I'm hearing from a lot of middle income people who are very concerned about it. You don't need to tax the rich to give tax relief to middle and lower income individuals.
Okay, and next we will go to Leo Brine with Publicola.
Hi. So my question is, if the capital gains tax is passed through the legislature and signed by the governor, what do you feel is a more tenable option to, I guess, stop it? Taking it to the Supreme Court or getting a referendum measure going?
Well, one thing that we should point out is it would be a violation of ethics for us to advocate for a ballot measure. So you're not going to see us advocating for one thing or another. And I guess I'll make an observation that I think that those that oppose this, and by the way, income tax has failed repeatedly on the ballot, and polling that many of you or your organizations have done have consistently shown that pretty strong majorities of the public have exactly the same concerns that Senator Rivers and Representative Orcutt just articulated. And I think that the public and those who are most interested will adopt all of the above strategy to do everything that they can to, make sure that it doesn't happen.
And I will just add that the chair of the Finance Committee yesterday during the committee hearing said that she was sure this was going to be litigated. It was a statement she made during committee.
One thing I would add on top of that is again, not going to advocate for or against a referendum, but what we can advocate for is the right to referendum. And as you know, we took off the emergency clause in the Senate. I hear there's a push to add it back in the House. That's unbelievable that not only do they want to advocate for a tax in a time like this, they want to keep the people from weighing in on the issue. It's like the people don't like this. We better not let them vote on the issue. That just seems wrong, wrong to me. And that's why we were successful in taking off in the Senate. I am hopeful that the House will keep the emergency clause off. But if they try to put it back on, I think that's certainly a newsworthy item.
And I would just like to note that if you look at the bill, it isn't set to take effect until January 1st of 2022. Which would be after any referendum vote anyway. And then the first revenues would not be coming in until 2023, which would be near the end of the biennium anyway. So it's not necessary for the purpose of writing the 21-23 biennial budget. So there's no reason why it could not go to a referendum.
Leo, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. And next I'll go to Sara Gentzler with McClatchy.
Thanks, Kim. So there's a group of lawmakers working on understanding the Blake decision and what the legislature should do in its wake. To what extent are members of your caucuses involved in those discussions, and what would you like to see come out of that work? And I would especially like to hear from you, Senator Brown, on this one, with Lewis County considering taking local action.
So I assume the group you're referring to is the one that came up in the media, the Senate Democrat or the Democrat media availability yesterday. I would tell you that's
Yes.
a group that we have not been invited to, disappointingly. We are certainly watching this pretty closely. We have a lot of concerns for public safety, for the cost of the state, for the individuals. I mean, we have folks who are willingly participating in drug court, trying to, change their substance abuse behavior for the better, and now they're essentially going to be out of luck, and that's I would say a humanitarian issue as well. So lots of issues here. It's not at all surprising, given kind of the unwillingness of the majorities to take quick action on this, that locals, including in my district, are deciding that they're going to deal with it themselves, and I'm supportive of that. This is a true public health, public safety issue that we should be dealing with, and instead we're kind of looking at the floor, and that's frankly disappointing. And again, if there is more going on that I don't know about, it's because we haven't been invited.
Sarah, this is Ann Rivers. We actually have a bill offered by one of our members, Senator Patton, in an attempt to address the issue. It is necessary to implement the budget, and so it remains alive. I do know also that Senator Hobbs and Senator Mullet presented something but couldn't get a hearing from Senator Peterson on their bill. But this is, as Senator Braun pointed out, a humanitarian crisis. And I know for myself, our house here in La Center, for the first time that we've ever been here, was prowled. And but for the fact that that we have security, who knows what might have happened. People who leave their doors unlocked shouldn't anymore, because we have released people with significant habits who will stop at nothing. We've seen the catalytic converter theft. The construction sites are reporting wire theft. Even though we have significant laws in place at the metal recyclers, it's not enough. And so for us to not have these individuals in treatment is, in my estimation, criminal.
Well, I'm glad that this question was asked. I'm sorry we're taking so long to talk about it, but I think it's because this is something that there's hardly a family in Washington, I bet, at least an extended family, that some part of the horrible downside of drug abuse hasn't touched. And certainly my family's experienced some of that. And I think the apparent inability of the majority to act may end up being tragic. I hope that they find a way to act, but the interface of the justice system and treatment, I think, is critical. And you don't find House Republicans agreeing with Senator Darneal all the time, but she has been instrumental at times in figuring out how do we have a treatment interface with the justice system that I think has saved people's lives. I absolutely know of one person that the combination of time in jail and treatment that specifically came out of a Senator Darneal program has saved her life and probably horrible, tragic consequences for her children. And to just throw all of that out is potentially a huge mistake. And in the House, Representative Mossbrooker and some of her Republican colleagues will be rolling out a series of bills that are not just, a simple fix, but trying to look forward and accomplish positive things are coming out. And I hope that the Democrats will either pick up those bills or go ahead with a positive approach that recognizes that this is too complicated a problem for just one system to address. And certainly the decision that came out of the Supreme Court was tragic in its broad and simplistic approach.
Sarah, do you have a follow-up?
Well, just to clarify, so it sounds like if there's not a lot of collaboration across party lines here, it sounds like maybe there are discussions happening within your caucuses. Is that right? Are there groups similar to what I guess was characterized yesterday by Democrats going on over in both of your caucuses?
That's correct, but it's a topic that is absolutely ready for bipartisan collaboration, and that's why I mentioned Senator Darnell.
Right. We have.
Oh, she froze up on us.
So I guess I should be clear, because I was talking in response to the meeting that was mentioned in
any
the
of the demo.
media availability yesterday, and we're not included in that. We have worked pretty closely with, to Senator Rivers' point, with Senator Mullet, Senator Hobbs. So there's at some level some bipartisan work going on, but not bipartisan work that is able to bring that bill to a vote, and that's the real challenge. Is there's been nothing offered by the majority that they're willing to bring to a vote, and certainly no offer by the majority to include us in discussions on a bill they're willing to bring to a vote.
And let's see, Jerry Cornfield with the Everett Herald.
Just taking that point, real quick question. Senator Brine, Lewis County is contemplating a local ordinance. Marysville up in Snohomish County passed an ordinance. It did sound like the Democratic senators are looking at a state preemption to keep cities and counties from acting to make it a drug possession, a crime, and leave it just to the state. Do you folks support a state preemption on this issue?
Well, not if we're not in the current situation where the state refuses to do anything material to address the issue. So if the state was willing to act and act thoughtfully and responsibly to address this statewide, I think it'd be open for discussion. But in the current circumstances where they're really not willing to take the issue on in a material way, no, I think the locals should be free to address it. I mean, they're the ones that are going to have to deal with the terrible or results of this decision. They're going to have to deal with the public safety issues. They're going to have to deal with the humanitarian issues I mentioned before. They should have the freedom to address the problem if the state won't act. And so far, state has not acted.
Jerry, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, quick question, different topic. It looks like we're on a course to have the eviction moratorium extended statewide. I'm wondering, with this extension, will your caucuses seek to add language for some form of means testing as the economy picks up, as more go to work, and some means testing of renters who have not paid or are and continue to not pay their rent?
Yeah, you've already seen major efforts in that direction from the House Republicans. And, I think there's a variety of concerns here. First of all, there's the simple fairness for people that are providing rental housing, many of whom are of modest means themselves and may lose their property, which they rented out in good faith. And if we're going to have an extension, then it should be for those who truly need it rather than people that are opportunists. And just like I think a tiny percentage of landlords may misbehave, I don't think it's the vast majority of renters that misbehave. It's a small percentage, but they can do great damage. I think the other thing that we have to be thinking about is this is going to be a hard thing to unwind. And the longer this goes on, the harder it is to unwind it. And I just feel like this is one of those times when you delay action, and instead of the problem going away or solving itself or getting better, it gets worse and worse and worse every day. And, one more time, I think by extending a moratorium, you are taking the legislature out of the picture. And this is such a huge, broad problem that to have the 147 people specifically elected to represent people in a transparent process, to have them excluded is a big mistake.
Okay, and our final question, it looks like, comes from Drew Mickelson from King 5, who was not able to switch over, but he sent me his question in advance. So it goes back to the State versus Blake decision, and he asks, if those who are wrongly convicted are due refunds, How much is that going to cost the state?
So back of the napkin work, the entire thing could be $92 to $136 million. And that does, and those are just rough estimates. That doesn't include the cost of pro tem judges to who would have to pick up the issue. So it's a significant price tag.
Okay. Senator Brine and Representative Wilcox, would you guys like to wrap up with some final comments before we're finished?
Sure. I mean, we covered the most interesting topics of the day already, so I don't think there's much to add there. I'll just thank everyone for showing up and asking great questions, and wish you a good day.
And I'll defer to Ann or Ed if they want to expand on anything.
Nope, thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.